Dear Dharma friends and our practitioners, today is a Sunday, 17th of August 2025. We continue the topics. Dharma talk without living the Buddha nature, practicing Dharma without living the Buddha nature. The meanings of this is always detach yourself from all of those egos, all the thinkings in the mind. No, nothing to ask for, nothing to achieve, and nothing to fear of. And we strip up all the objective, subjective, or the dualistic aspect of the mind. All of these are just the explanations, the words. If you don't apply this into the practice, which means you're running after the elusive thinking of the mind. Nowadays, our elusive thinkings, our elusive mind, our technologies is so vast, make us always have the attachment on them. When you don't have the belief in your own Buddha nature, believe in your Buddha words, and without the practice to apply those words, then you going on a wrong path and you don't recognize your own mistake. And sometimes you take the wrong fullness or the illusions as the right thing. That's why the sixth patriarch said that Dharma talk has to go along with the Buddha nature. Anything that you attach to that is going on the wrong path, even when you're practicing. When you attach to the truth, that's attachment. When you attach to the quality, that's also the attachment. When you attach to the Buddha, that's also the attachment. So the true Dharma here is no attachment at all to anything. That's why we need to be very careful. Don't attach ourselves to any dualistic aspect of mind. And that is the topic for this week. If you have any questions or want to share your own experience in practice, go ahead and speak up. I'd like to share my own experience in practicing. When you in contact with the real world, I usually present my practice to you. That is the movement or anything going on in the practice. I talk to you. Yesterday, when I was practicing, I go into the image. I don't remember if I was asking the questions, but when I awakened from that, I realized that the time went so fast, and I realized that the time for walking meditations, I don't remember what I was doing. I don't feel like I have feel sleepiness or not. When I did the practicing sitting meditations, I always have either the questions that I stick to, and sometimes I got into the sleepiness. However, this time I don't feel anything. Could you give me some words of explanation on this? So anything that you see during the practicing, the sleepiness, the movements of your body, or nothing at all in your mind, those are just the creations of your own mind. That because of a habit that we've been having for several lives. Suffering, not suffering, those are just the two faces of the coin. Knowing or not knowing, those are just the dream that you are in. When you still in a dream, the dream affects your life in that dreams. When you do in the practice, as the Like Wallace Master said, when you have the doubt, still asking the questions. When you don't have the doubt, asking the question still. When you have the illusions coming in to your mind, come back to asking questions, raising doubt. Even when you enter the emptiness of your mind, still need to go back to asking questions and raising doubt. In our practice, it's just like a student, a very good students, when they studying, sometimes they feel like their mind is blank out and they couldn't remember anything. They couldn't study anymore, and they didn't want to go and play. And that is what we experience as a students. But in our practice, sometimes we go into that emptiness of the mind. We feel like we have no questions and no doubts, and we feel nothing at all. And that is still the disease of the mind that you going into. Even you in the stillness of the mind, the emptiness of the mind, that have nothing to do with our liberation of the mind. We need to go back to asking questions and raising doubt. We need to prolong the doubt and let the doubt sweep up all of these feelings or seeing for us automatically. So these are just words of explanations. If you want to attach yourself to these words, which means you putting more woods into the fire, you won't be able to extinguish the fire. Some people said that you want to find this happiness in the suffering. That you won't be able to do it like that. Just go back to nothing to ask for, nothing to achieve, and nothing to fear of. You detach yourself from everything going on in the mind. Our doubt is not something to oppose anything. Our words of explanations is not something for you to attach to, but for you to remind you to go back to the practice. When you practice, you use the applied wisdom to enter the observation wisdom, and that will lead you slowly to your Buddha nature wisdom. So the doubt is the cause of the wisdom, and it has nothing to attach to. When you ask the questions and raising doubt and maintaining the doubt is a cause and the enlightenment is an effect. For some people, they said that, why don't you keep your mind quiet, but you use the doubt to stir up your mind? This is the key right here. We're using the doubt to sweep up everything going on in the mind, and we don't attach ourselves to the doubt even. Everything going on in our mind, it's just because we don't believe in our own Buddha nature. That's why we don't believe in our practice fully. We're not going on the right path. That's why we need to correct ourselves when we doing the practice. We always correct ourselves, our mistake. Dharma has only one destination. When you reach your Buddha nature, there's nothing for you to attach to. So our practice is always going on. We base on the asking questions and raising doubts. At first, we still put in our effort to ask the questions and raising doubts. Eventually, you don't need to put in that effort, but your questions and your doubt will go on automatically. That's why all practitioners must believe in their own Buddha nature, must go back to the practice, and that will be the goal that we reach. Is that understandable? Yes, thank you for your words. Pháp Từ, go ahead. I'd like to share my experience. This problem that Kim In just asked is a disease, the common disease that most practitioners had, the mind, the moving mind that we had, the mind that always responds to everything. And this body, which is a combination of 5 elements, just because we attach to the ignorance, the knowings, and it's become the mistakes. There are 50 problems that putting you in the wrong way of practicing. We need to go back to Lăng Nghiêm Sutra to read about these 50 problems of ghost interference. When we practice, we always have a tendency to react to everything going on in our mind. This is because we don't know how to support our belief in a Buddha nature. That's why we just have a feeling of frustrations during the practice. Just like when you said, when our practitioners asking any questions, you always remind us to go back to our questions and the doubts. Normally, when you asking the questions and raising doubts, which means you plant a right seed already. So just use that, get used to that, and eventually you can apply this practice in all activities in our living. So when you're facing with any challenges in your life, it's just because you get used to the practice already, then those challenges become so normal and it becomes so easy to overcome. Just because we get used to our practice, we get familiar with our practice already, then we overcome those challenges easily. So for those patriot practitioners, patriot Zen practitioners, we need to do the practice little by little every day. The levels of attachment that each person had, we will have a better progress in our practice differently. It's just like a person, when you want to go out and play, we need a means to detach yourself from that wanting to play outside. That's why we had these schedules for us to practice, to limit us from that mind of going out and playing. We're learning how to get the wisdom and get the stillness of the mind by doing the practice. That's why I want to share my own experience in this. Could you give us some more words first? Thank you. So every single practitioner has their own view in practice. They has their own experience. However, no matter what experience that you had, you must ask questions and raising doubts. If not, you might attach to something, to the ignorance that you don't realize that you attached to. Sometimes you said that you practice without putting any efforts. The less efforts, the better. However, the Buddha always said that we need to do the practice diligently, continuously. But why? They also said that the less effort, the better. It feels like contradiction to each other in the words. However, it's just because our understanding is not there yet. That's why you take those words and you attach yourself to those words. And that is the problem also. When we said that we go on the direct methods, but sometimes we criticize the indirect methods. And then when we practicing, sometimes we going back to the Buddha words, and instead of practicing to digest the words, we attach ourselves to those words and criticize others' methods. That's why that's a problem for many practitioners. At first, some people, when they make the practice, make the vow to practice, sometimes they couldn't practice correctly and they want to do something else in order to gain the practice instead of going on and keep on practicing on that methods. That's why they might trick them to go to another methods that they didn't know. And it's because they attach themselves to the words of explanations. This is why true Dharma must detach yourself from anything going on in the mind. In order to do so, you must stick to your methods and continue to practice just one method. Or your mind will trick you. The more you practice, the elusive thinkings in the mind still there to lure you away from your practice. That's why the Buddha said that the more you practice, the more elusive thinking in the mind is there to lure you away from your practice. That's why we need to be very careful when you're doing the practice. This is also why we need a Dharma friends nearby or the masters nearby to help us to go on the right path. The circle of birth and death is always there to haunt us. The death is always there to haunt us. That's why we need to practice diligently. when the Buddha and the patriarch said that when you're doing the practice, you don't ask for anything, you don't want to achieve anything. That's why you don't fear of anything. The more you practice, the more you feel like you put in less efforts to practice, because your practice is going automatically. It doesn't mean that you don't put in any effort at all. You're doing less practice, which means you put in less efforts. You practicing all the times, but it's going on automatically without you put in your intentions. Some people make an excuse that they said that they can do the practice everywhere. I can go and play in the party or go to the club, and I can still doing my practice. That's just an excuse. Even for some people, they said that they can practice even when they listen to the Dharma talk continuously. But sometimes that's only the excuse. For me, before, I also listened to the Dharma talk. However, only for a little bit to remind me and encourage me to go back to the practice. But I don't read or attach myself to anything I read or reading the whole book. When you're practicing following the schedules, sometimes those elusive thinking of the mind still follow you every single second. That's why the words from the Dharma talk or from the Buddha are just encouragement for us to go back to our practice. Eventually, when we practice enough, we will be able to go back to our own Buddha nature. We can stay away from all other ignorance, and that is the meanings from the Buddha or the patriarchs want us to do. When you go along with the right Dharma, you need to detach yourself from everything going on in your mind. Is that understandable? Thank you for your words. I understand. Pháp Tuệ, go ahead. Through the sharing experience from the Dharma friends, yesterday I asked you questions that many practitioners are also listen to the Dharma talk. However, they always going against the Dharma. Is that because they only listen to the Dharma talk without practicing and apply those Dharma talk in their life? Is that because they only practice, they only listen and they don't practice? That's why they always having those suffering in their life. How can we transform those words, concepts into the practicing of our own life. Could you give us some more encouragement on this? It's not because of what's going on outside, but it's because the attachment that we had on these that going on outside. The activities outside, they are always something from outside. The ghost is in your mind. The king of hell is in your mind. Those are the attachments that you had for those going on outside. That's why the Buddha asks us to practice diligently and continuously. As a Sikh patriarch taught us that knowing your own mistake, don't look at other people's mistake. The teaching tells us don't discriminate, don't put in your discrimination on anything, but go back to the practice. When a person got enlightenment, it's just like someone got the ultimate reward in the lottery. That's why we need to practice until we got the ultimate goal. On the way of practice, the king of hell always there to catch us and pull us down to hell. You are on your own on this practicing. You need to put in your efforts in order to get the result. You don't just stay there and doing nothing and expect that you can reach your goal. Sentient beings are so stubborn and they don't want to do anything. They want to take the shortcuts all the times. That's why the Buddha always have many means, many skillful means to help all levels of sentient beings to do the practice. And as the Buddhist, we must practice. We don't just listen to the Dharma talk. We don't let anything affect us by doing the practice. For us, we always ask questions and raising doubt. Believe in our own Buddha nature. Don't rely on what's going on in our mind. Don't believe in your illusive thinking created by your own mind. When you're running after those thinking in your mind, which means you're going on the wrong path. When you have discriminations of right or wrong, which means you're going on the wrong path. It's just like in Langim, the Buddha said that knowing, hearing, seeing, and feeling, those are just the illusive thinking of the mind, the illusive creations of the mind. It doesn't mean that you have to kill this body in order to reach anything. You need to rely on this body and use it to practice in order to get back to your own Buddha nature. Always believe in your own Buddha nature and continue to practice diligently.